Serious Redditors who have dated celebrities before they were famous. How did the relationship end? Was seeing Hannah Murray, Gilly, Got or Cassie, Skins, for a while around 10 years or so ago. Just when season 2 of Skins came out. Turns out a girl I worked with knew her, I fancied her, and so we orchestrated a meeting between us. She organized a coffee with her, and I just so happened to stumble into the cafe. We hit it off, and we ended up having a little thing for 5 months or so. We went to the cinema, ate and drank. She is highly intelligent, very perceptive and really quite funny. I was young and rubbish at dating, and I'm guessing she wasn't too experienced either. In the end she called me one day after a week of silence and dumped me because she was going to uni. Fair enough. I'm super happy for her and think she's a great actress. I can't remember the guy's name, but my grandma dated a future NFL defensive lineman who later became one of JFK's bodyguards and was present when he was assassinated. They met at Penn State, where my grandma went for only 1 semester. He was apparently very friendly. He'd carry her books around for her and take her out for dinner. Grandma said the reason it didn't last was because he was black and she's white, so the relationship couldn't get off the ground. This was in the 1940s. They stayed in touch up until he became a member of the Secret Service. Ike dated a local celeb. At the time, she wasn't as famous as she is now. We had a lot in common and hit it off well. The first weeks felt really odd to me, especially looking at her Facebook profile and her public page filled with comments from men hitting on her. I felt a little jealous, but at the same time, felt like I should understand why it's that way. She's a celebrity, after all, and has a lot of fans and admirers. Our dates were nothing special. Fast food, park, movies, typical stuff. The only difference is that from time to time, people recognize her and either openly call her, shyly approach her for a pic, or secretly point her out to their friends. I usually volunteer to take their picture for them. Speaking of pictures, I couldn't be seen with her on any of her pics on social media. I didn't complain about it too. Didn't like the spotlight, and at the time I knew I couldn't handle being known as ex's boyfriend instead of my own name. I got to know her really well off cam. This was my favorite part of it all. Looking back, something about looking at her beyond the veil of her fame got to me. She loved board games and anime. She's clumsy with her belongings. She could curse up a storm. Things she couldn't just show in public. I saw, not a sexual innuendo. My respect for celebrities grew, and they were humanized in my eyes through her. Now I don't just blindly express my idolatry to celebrities I like, and not only because of their looks. I now admire the ones I like in the same way I look up to the people who've positively influenced me. And when they make some public faux pas, I'm quick to forgive them, even the ones I don't really care much about. We're all human. We went our separate ways after her commitments got bigger and my personal issues got worse. We called it off on a positive note and promised one another to focus on being better individuals apart instead of trying to get together while both broken and incomplete. We figured out that the "you complete me" mantra is bullshit and life isn't like the movies. And now she's taking on a lot of major projects and films. And I've found my passion and knack for public speaking and leadership, which I channel through being actively involved in D&D events. Last I've heard, she's happily in a relationship with someone else, and so am I. It was a weird phase in my life, and probably hers too. And I'm more than happy to look back to it with no regrets and a whole lot of smiles. I went on one date with Hannibal Buress. He was in my city briefly, after doing a benefit gig elsewhere a few years ago, and we matched on Tinder, met up for a drink before his flight left later that evening. He's a cool dude, I had fun. Did not have sex, sorry to disappoint. Apparently he's pretty notorious for being on Tinder, so I feel like a lot of people probably have a similar story. Lol. Pretty D-list, but my fiancé went to HS with one of the girls on VH1's Black Ink crew. I guess they hooked up a few times. Knew a guy that would go on dates with Christina Aguilera back around 1999 to 2000. This was right around when Genie in a Bottle broke out. Apparently she would call him at all hours of the day and expect him to drop whatever he was doing to respond or come to her place. She dressed him and gave him things, pretty much treated him like a kept man. He might have been bullshitting me, but it lines up with everything I've heard about Kath from the people that knew her. He eventually broke things off from her, and she didn't handle that very well. She would get wasted and drunk dial him. My brother briefly dated / hung around Hayden Panettiere right after her first Disney movie came out, Tiger Cruise. It was one of my favorites at the time. Before Heroes or anything. Apparently she had family who had a lake house in our hometown, and they met at a party and started to hang out when she would visit her family. She even came to the Strawberry Festival with me and my brother. Mind you, I'm 10 years younger, so I was like 7 or 8 at the time, and was really nice to me because I was so awestruck to be meeting a Disney actress. She even made a DIY candle with me at a festival booth that I kept 4 years afterward. Nicest girl he ever introduced me to, second only to his later fiancée. I went on a date and spent the night with a mediocre pop singer from the UK once. Had a couple of songs that got pretty well known. We went to Nando's, and as we were walking back to his, he started singing one of his more popular songs really loud, trying to get noticed. It was next level cringe. The sex was about as mediocre as his voice and personality, so I snuck out at like 5 AM to go home and wonder what the fuck I was doing with my life. I dated Kristen Bell. She was just as cute back then as she is now. She is a great person. Things ended on her terms. I would have married her and only dated her for about a month. We went out a couple times, made out and such, but didn't go too far. I dated a woman who is currently a regular on CW's Riverdale. We dated some years ago when she was younger. She was a fairly successful model and actor at the time, even more so now clearly. We met while working on the same television show, and I asked her out. Didn't expect her to say yes as she was way out of my league, but she did, and we hung out for a month or so. She eventually went back home, and we tried long distance for a few weeks before deciding that it wouldn't work. We've talked once or twice over the years, but she is firmly in a different social strata now. Overall, she was very nice and fairly intelligent, but very focused on being an actor / model, and didn't really know any other lifestyle. My dad dated Emma Thompson in the 80s. My dad was more famous than Emma at the time. She was a student at Cambridge and my dad was doing okay as a model. He met Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie and the whole crew. He's sketchy on the details, but I heard from my mum that she, Emma, dumped him. Maybe infidelity? Last year I talent walked Kenneth Branagh and his wife at a BAFTA thing, and it took everything in me not to mention to his lovely wife, who I had a lot of alone time with, while Sir Ken walked the carpet, that actually we were connected in a weird way. I also see Hugh Laurie around, and I always tell my dad, who is now a very mild semi-retired architect, and he always tells me to say hi to him. I never have. These people won't remember you, Dad. Sorry. My father dated one of the wealthiest women in the United States for a few years in college and rekindled their relationship briefly after my folks split a few years ago. This lady comes from a wealthy family that owns a few professional sports teams, media networks and candy companies, so she was more rich than she was famous. My father said it was pretty interesting living that lifestyle, but noted that she was rather cheap with her money and expected him to pay for a lot of their dates. He however does not come from money and is a community college professor. Needless to say, it was rather difficult for him. They also disagreed when it came to politics. Naturally, she was pretty conservative, loved the tax breaks from the Bush administration. My father on the other hand does have the complete opposite political views. After about a year of dating the second time around they agreed to part ways. They are still friends to this day and talk every once in a while. I fucked a now fairly well known, in Ohio, at least, newsperson when we were in college on the regular. Wouldn't really say we dated, but we hooked up a lot over the course of a few months. Ended fine. She was fun and very career driven and focused. We just sort of stopped hooking up. For a while, when I'd see her on billboards it was fun to tell people I hit that. Friend of mine dated a US senator. He wasn't really around often. She'd fly down to see him in DC occasionally, but they'd only see each other when he was in district. Their dates were usually at home. or in a private setting. I met him at a house party. Very nice guy. It was interesting to see him when the cameras weren't around. It didn't last long. She wanted something a little more stable. I know a guy who dated an A+ list movie star who is known for being extremely beautiful. He said some really horrible shit about her, including she's still just a fat girl who would do anything for approval. Just goes to show that even movie stars can fall into codependent relationships with alcoholic assholes. Just hang on, this will go somewhere. My mom claimed to me when I was a kid that she used to always buy pizza for people she really liked. And she told me one time she bought pizza for the entire school football team in high school. She also told me that after a concert she bought pizza for the band Madness. If you don't know, they made that Our House in the Middle of Our Street song and went on a date with the drummer. Then as an adult my mom told me she slept with the drummer from Madness. Everything started piecing itself together in my head. And now I'm worried that buying pizza was a euphemism for sleeping with people, and I'm too scared to ask if my mom slept with the whole football team. My mum turned down Brad Pitt in a bar in Ireland. He had just landed his role in Thelma and Louise, so was only really known for his Leviat, but my mum didn't know who he was. He asked to buy her a drink and she declined. He told her about being the Levy model and she awkwardly declined again. She really regrets it now. Oh, and she turned him down because he had really bad acne, which she feels bad about now, but she was 19 at the time. I dated a C-list celebrity for a brief time in New York. When I first moved here, in search of becoming part of the film industry, I started as a lowly production assistant on one of the many terrible part jobs I got. While I was working in the ad department, we had a commercial shoot for Amanda Seyfried and some Japanese shampoo. Don't jump to any conclusions, as I did not date Amanda Seyfried, even though she was very nice. One of my fellow pars on the shoot was this tall, thin, and absolutely gorgeous Australian girl with an accent that bowled me over. We spent the day doing mundane tasks together, such as getting coffee, making food runs, handing out paperwork, etc. Anyway, as we got to know each other, I could tell there was chemistry. Next came the bomb. She told me she was the host of TRL, Total Request Live, in Australia before moving to New York. I was obviously baffled, but also could see how it could be true, so while she was off doing another task I looked her up. Yep, Lindsay Rodriguez. She had a Maxim photo shoot and my eyes went wide. She looked amazing. I totally didn't put any pressure on myself and continued to be charming and nice. That night, after a long day of shooting, 14 hours, we went out for drinks, and one thing led to another. We ended up dating for a couple months, but my film path took me to a completely different department and union television work, while she stayed in the non-union world. Too much of a difference between our lives and very mutually split. But it was fun while it lasted. P.S. I ended up becoming an assistant camera operator for a CMT reality show, Party Down South. After the show ended, I ended up hanging out with the cutest girl on the show, Matty, for a couple of weeks. A fling, but again fun while it lasted. So I guess technically to C-list celebrities. I dated Dickie Betts many years ago. He was unfailingly thoughtful and kind. He was going through a crazy overindulging in drugs and alcohol phase, but somehow never forgot to make sure I felt safe and taken care of. He assigned me a roadie to make sure I was taken care of while he was on stage. Once he had a bit of a breakdown and started destroying a hotel room. When he saw I was getting worried, he picked me up and carried me to the door of the suite, then called the road manager to come get me. He walked barefoot across broken glass with me in his arms. I played basketball in high school and had a game against the school that Jamie Lynn Spears went to. She was a cheerleader there. During the game, I dive out of bounds and slide into the cheerleaders, and Jamie Lynn ends up falling into my lap. Only I didn't realize it because I'm scrambling to get back up and keep playing. My teammates point it out to me when I check out a few minutes later. A few weeks later, I'm at a party and see her, so I walk over and say, "Hey, I'm the guy from school that got you on my lap in a matter of seconds." She said, "Well, it certainly wasn't the worst first impression." We talked for about 15 minutes before she left. Turns out we had the same birthday. 3 weeks later it came out she was pregnant. One of my best friends dated Millie Cyrus, then Destiny Cyrus, back in middle school. We all went to the same elementary school then started middle school together. Mind you, this is all before Hannah Montana was created. Back then her and her brother, Trace Cyrus, of Metro Station fame, were just Billy Ray Cyrus's kids, which didn't mean much to us back then. They dated for all of our 6th grade year, until she moved to Toronto, I believe, to start pre-production on a Disney show, which we would later find out to be Hannah Montana. He wasn't too beat up about it, as he described her as being kinda crazy. One story I remember is that after a mutual friend of theirs was broken up with by her boyfriend, Millie tried to get my friend to make out with her to cheer her up, which he refused to do. Also, after the show came out, and her face was all over Tiger, Beaten 17 magazine, we would rip out the pictures of her, cut a hole in the mouth, hold them up to our face and chase him around saying, "I miss you asterisk asterisk asterisk, come to Hollywood and be with me." We probably could've been a little nicer about it,